Now I understand the history of English from Proto-Indo-European and Old English. How did it evolve since then up to the 21st century? Don't forget to subscribe to Lang Explorer to show your support. In a previous video, we told you about the history from Proto-Indo-European, which used to be spoken in prehistory, to Old English. We saw that quite a few elements of our language, such as vocabulary and grammar, are related to its history and shared with Germanic and other Indo-European languages. Today, we show you the history of the English language from the 11th century to the present. We'd like to invite you to resume your journey to see how it has evolved into what it is today, which historical influences are observed on modern English, and how it became the world language, replacing French. In Part 1, we showed you the history of English from Proto-Indo-European to Old English. In this video, we'd like to tell you from Middle English to Modern English. We need to pay attention to an epoch-making event, not only for the history of the English language, but also for that of England itself, which splits between Old English and Middle English. This event was the Norman Conquest, when William, Count of Normandy in present-day France, conquered England in 1066 and ascended the throne as King William I. Since then, his descendants have been English monarchs, up to the incumbent Charles III. Many nobles moved from Normandy to England since then, and the French language, or more precisely, the Norman dialect of French, instead of English, became widely spoken among the English court. This situation continued for more than 200 years, incorporating many French words into English and creating considerable differences from German and Dutch, which had little influence from French. The vocabulary that entered the English language from French at that time covered a wide variety of areas. In the case of animals, Germanic words continued to refer to the animals themselves, while other words of French origin came to refer to meat. For example, the French word bœuf, meaning ox, became the English word beef, and the original Germanic word ox means only live bull. Similarly, pig is used for those alive, while pork from French is used for meat, and sheep is used for those alive, while mutton from French is used for meat. Other terms of French origins are related to social institutions, such as peasant, government, mass, duke, etc., to military terms such as army, siege, soldier, troop, etc., and to economy such as commerce, finance, tax, treasury, etc. The total number of words of French origin is still debated, but there's no doubt that tens of thousands of words in modern English are of French origin. Grammar became much simpler during the Middle English period. The number of cases with the same ending increased with the weakening of the declensions. Eventually, no distinction was made except for the possessive apostrophe s and the plural s, as in modern English. Gender remained until the early period, but then disappeared altogether, and pronouns he, him, she, and her are used for people while it's used for stuffs, as in modern English. From then on, ye, originally the second-person plural, started to be used to refer to people in higher social positions, instead of thou. Watch another video that explains thou in detail. Also, the conjugation of verbs became only in the present and past tenses, and the subjunctive conjugated forms basically disappeared. Other significant features in Middle English include major changes in pronunciation. Until then, English words were pronounced just as spelled, like other languages. However, substantial pronunciation changes occurred from the 14th to 15th centuries onward, creating a large discrepancy between spelling and pronunciation, which has been a concern for English learners today. First, let's look at the changes that have occurred in consonants. For example, the word for night used to be pronounced Knecht up to the beginning of the Middle English, which is similar to the German word Knecht. However, the pronunciation of GH began to change in late Middle English, and while in some words it turned into F, such as rough and enough, in other cases it became silent, such as right and thought. Also, at the end of Middle English or at the beginning of Modern English, the K in KN was silent, but spellings have been intact up to now. However, we shouldn't forget the significant change, the Great Vowel Shift. Before that, English words used to be pronounced basically as they were spelled, like other languages, but this Great Vowel Shift, which began in the early 15th century and lasted up to the 17th century, changed the vowel system of English drastically. This has resulted in a rather complicated spelling system. The long vowels were raised one by one and became pronounced as in modern English make, meet, moon, etc. On the other hand, sounds that could not be raised any higher, such as e and woo, were broken and became hi and out, etc. In British English, ou has been further changed into schwa plus woo, as in Sherlock Holmes. Next, Early Modern English. It refers to English from the 16th to approximately the end of the 19th century. This period began in the middle of the Great Vowel Shift that we've already seen, so pronunciation and spelling were quite unstable in the early days. Later, however, intellectuals and people in the publishing industry began to establish a consensus on spelling, which has continued to the present day. While the Académie Française, founded in 1635, and the Royal Spanish Academy, founded in 1713, are in charge of compiling dictionaries, determining spelling, and setting grammatical rules for their respective language, neither the United Kingdom nor the United States has such official institutions. The mass media and academics are de facto responsible for such tasks. In French and Portuguese, the recent announcement of a new spelling rule made headlines, but in English, no official body takes such a chore, and in fact, there are more than a few words spelled differently in British and American English. Early modern English also began in the middle of the Renaissance, which was sweeping Europe with many cultural developments. Intellectuals at that time loved to flaunt their knowledge of Latin, abusing such words of Latin origin in their writings, and such words were ridiculed as inkhorn terms by the general public. Many have fallen into disuse, but quite a few have since become English words and continue to be used today. For example, revolution, celebrate, superiority, contemplate, antique, relinquish, frivolous, and so on. Nowadays, these words are part of the English vocabulary to be commonly used, but when they appeared in the mid-16th century, they were used by such intellectuals to show off their culture. In this period, only you was used for the second person. English used to have thou and ye. The former was used for one person while the latter was used for two people or more, or when respect has to be shown. When you read Shakespeare's plays, you can find thou, as well as its accusative thee and its possessive thy and thine. By the 18th century, however, thou began to fall out of use and was replaced by ye. In addition, you, originally the accusative of ye, also came to be used in the nominative case. In modern English, thou is used only in some dialects in the United Kingdom or as an archaic word, while du in German, tu in French, tu in Italian, Spanish and Portuguese, and de in Russian are still widely used to show closeness. So, we can say English has started to evolve differently. In addition, declensions and verb conjugations have been further simplified. As for declensions, they were simplified to only st for the second person singular and th for the third person singular, but the third person singular has since been replaced by s, which was originally used in the dialect. Also, as we discussed earlier, thou became obsolete, and you, even in the case of one person, came into use, which also caused the second person singular to lose its conjugated ending. As a result, in modern English, except the verb be, the conjugation of verbs has been completely eliminated except for the third person singular, resulting in a simple structure in which basically only the past tense and past participle are conjugated. So modern English lacks the distinction for the second person between singular and plural, while it distinguishes for the first person, I and we, and the third person, he, she, and they. This situation, sometimes confusing, might have given rise to the use of you guys and y'all in North America for second person plural. The possessive is still your, and it's still uncertain if English will eventually have its own second person plural, similar to other European languages, or if it will continue to have only you for the second person. On the other hand, English was behind other languages in establishing its grammar, while French and Spanish already had their grammar in 1550 and 1492, respectively. Despite several books on English grammar, no book won the privilege of being trusted by everybody, and intellectuals in Britain and North America found it hard to write prestigious texts in their own language. The picture changed in 1762 when Richard Lowe published a short introduction to English grammar with positive feedback. Then Lindley Murray improved Lowe's book, which was rather for adults, to publish the book English Grammar for Children in 1795, which sold like a hotcake on both sides of the North Atlantic Ocean. This work eventually became the base for the English grammar we learn today. Another reason this period is relevant in the history of the English language is that, above all, the emergence of the superpowers, the British Empire and the United States, led English to be the world language. In Europe, it used to be Latin and later French, which were spoken as lingua franca. French is still the first official language in some international organizations established before World War I, such as the Universal Postal Union and the International Olympic Committee. However, as the British Empire gained global influence in the late 19th century with its colonies in Asia and Africa, while the United States also expanded its territory westward and continued to develop, these two English-speaking countries became dominant in the world. And English took over the position of the world language from French, especially after the World War I. Later, former British colonies in Asia and Africa taught English even more enthusiastically after their independence instead of abandoning it, so today, English is used not only as a language of the United Kingdom and the United States but also of their former colonies, such as the Philippines and Singapore, Malaysia and India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka in Asia, Kenya and Nigeria, South Africa and Zambia in Africa, and other nations in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. Furthermore, we must recognize the fact that in today's world with growing international exchange, opportunities to use English as a lingua franca are increasing. The European Union, for example, on the one hand, encourages the learning of various languages from the perspective of multilingualism, but on the other hand, English is becoming increasingly common at meetings with people of different native languages unless simultaneous interpretation is available. In addition, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, currently has 10 member countries. English is only official in some countries, namely the Philippines, Malaysia, and Singapore, while it isn't in other nations, but is the only official language of ASEAN. Therefore, knowing English is enough when you meet representatives of various countries in the region. On the other hand, we should point out that the lack of a standard language throughout the whole English-speaking world has resulted in the use of two main standards, namely British English and American English, with considerable differences in spelling and pronunciation between them. British English tends to use French-influenced spelling still, while American English adopts spellings that are relatively faithful to pronunciation, so you can easily guess if it's written in British English or American English just by spotting some words that are spelled differently. Also, due to the complexity of spelling and pronunciation rules, some people in Asia and the Middle East speak English with strong local accents, as it's just a second language for them. As these countries develop economically, these various pronunciations are heard more often. In particular, as India has surpassed China in population and its influence continues to grow, perhaps Indian English will become just as globally significant as British and American English. Now, let's summarize what we've learned today and in the previous video. 1. The ultimate ancestor of English is Proto-Indo-European, which was spoken in what is now Ukraine and southern Russia around 3500 to 3000 BC. A number of words used in English are either directly derived from Proto-Indo-European or via Latin or Greek. Languages derived from Proto-Indo-European are still in use from the Indian subcontinent to almost all parts of Europe. 2. Proto-Indo-European was very complex in terms of gender, declension, and conjugation, among others, but your knowledge of subjunctive helps you understand why s is omitted in this mood and why we say I were for the past tense. 3. The Germanic languages. A branch of the Indo-European languages include German, Dutch, Swedish, Danish, and other Scandinavian languages, in addition to English. They were derived from the Proto-Germanic spoken between 2500 and 2000 years ago, and Grimm's law explains how its phonology differs from other branches of the Indo-European languages. Some rules are specific to the Germanic language group, such as V2 word order and umlaut. 4. English started to be spoken in what is now England in the 5th century AD. Due to its geographical distance from other West Germanic languages and the Viking occupation of parts of England in the mid-medieval period, English began to take on characteristics not found in other West Germanic languages. On the other hand, the High German consonant shift, which took place in German, didn't happen in English or Dutch, leading to differences in pronunciation, especially between German and English. 5. Old English was grammatically quite complex, and its vocabulary was primarily Germanic, but Middle English, after the Norman conquest of 1066, suffered from the French influence, and many words of French origin entered English. The declension was also considerably simplified, approaching the present form in which nouns do not change except in the possessive case. 6. Furthermore, from late Middle English to the beginning of modern English, some consonants were dropped, and vowels changed drastically due to the Great Vowel Shift. 7. In the 16th century, just in the middle of the Renaissance, intellectuals preferred their own style, called Inkhorn terms, over using Latin origin words, and many of such words are still used in modern English. 8. In early modern English, both declension and verb conjugations were almost eliminated, as it is today. In particular, the second-person singular, thou, disappeared, and the second-person plural, you, was used as singular too, losing the conjugation for thou too. 9. In the 19th century, with the rise of the British Empire and the United States, English spread worldwide and firmly established itself as a global language after World War I, overtaking French. In addition, countries such as those of former British colonies have continued to use English after their independence, and English's position as a lingua franca has been increasingly strengthened as globalization continues. 10. On the other hand, there's no standard language recognized by the entire English-speaking world, and mainly two standard languages, British English and American English, continue to be used simultaneously. Perhaps Indian English will be recognized globally as the third standard English. Thank you for watching this video. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next one.